Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome. My name is Mike Hall. I'm Executive Director of Financial Aid for Columbia College and Columbia Engineering, and want to welcome you this morning to our summer webinar series session. Uh, it's a great opportunity to talk with all of you. I know I've talked with a number of you probably through our Days on Campus events and things like that, but at this point, I certainly want to welcome everybody to Columbia. This is nice that we're starting to actually make it real and kick things off here. Along with me today, you're going to see on the Q&A feature of the webinar, I have Karel, Jesse, and Simran from our staff here in our office who are going to be helping with questions as we go along today. So you're going to see them. You can put some questions in the Q&A, and then at the end, we're actually going to take questions in front of the whole group. So some of the more frequent questions that come up, as well as any that just sort of come up in general, I will be addressing for the group there. All right, well, that being said, let me share my screen and let's jump in with the prepared session here. So first off, let's go over our agenda for today. To give you an idea of what topics we are going to be covering. So first off, I'm going to give you a quick overview of our office, what functions we do at a high level. And the key thing here is there's actually another session later today at 11:30 with the Student Service Center and billing functions that has some overlap with us and sort of, so I wanted to tell you a little bit about what we do, and my colleague Kia Woods from the Student Service Center is going to talk about what her office does a little bit later. So we're going to give you that informal introduction to our office so that you understand the differences between the two offices. We're then going to talk about grants. So that's the nice free money and what happens now. What do you need to do to get the grants going onto the bill and student account and things like that. We'll talk about loans for those who need them. They're not a part of what we put into our financial aid awards initially, but they are certainly available if, as a family, either the student or the parents need some help with the contributions that we're expecting there. We'll also talk about federal work study, and I just realized that typo there, a little fat-fingered, the S. I'll fix that a little bit later. But we'll talk about federal work study and student employment. So those are aspects of financial aid offers, as well as students in general just want to work, and how do you go about doing that? We'll touch on outside scholarships, which are scholarship awards that students receive from outside of Columbia, right? So this may be from a local scholarship organization. This may be from your high school, maybe the Gates Foundation or Jack Kent Cooke, one of the big ones like that. But we'll talk about what to do with those, how they impact your financial aid award, and different aspects like that. So then towards the end, a section called Good to Know. And this is a section that actually is going to be just little tidbits of things. Some things that are good to do right now, others that are just going to be, FYIs and things like that. But we're going to go over a couple of different things that are just really timely at this moment for you to know. And then at that point, I'll certainly take questions from the group, and also my team will queue up any questions. I'm like, oh yeah, that was a really good one that came in earlier. They'll go ahead and go over that one. Okay, so first up, our office, financial aid and educational financing. So, there's really two key things that our office does that's sort of summarized in these items here. The first off, let me start with this, is we're the office that technically processes financial aid, right? So there's a lot of stuff that happens on the back end with, whenever you fill out your FAFSA, you fill out your CSS profile, or your New York State TAP applications. So we're the office that actually does a lot of the processing related to your actual financial aid. But that being said, that also makes us prime people to be giving you guidance and helping you through that financial aid trail. I think this year in particular, with all the FAFSA issues, it was a tougher year than most to sort of navigate the financial aid process, and we're here to help you with that. We are certainly here to help families understand the process, what to do. If something's happened and you need to appeal your financial aid award, we can help you with that. And so we're really here as a resource in addition to the processing work that we do. And then lastly, we actually do some student workshops throughout the year as well on some financial aid topics, some sort of financial literacy topics as well. That's not necessarily the bulk of what we do, but it is something that we do put out there. Okay, so first up, grants. And this is probably one question on a lot of people's minds, like, okay, great, you gave me that award. Now, how does that all work? And the good news is that there really isn't anything that most students or families need to do for their grants at this point. The grants will automatically show up on the e-bill when that comes out next month, and more on that in the next session at 11:30. And additionally, the grants should, the majority of them are going to automatically disperse during the first week of classes. Now, when I say disperse, there's, again, this is going to be talked about later. There's the bill, and then there's, the actual student account. So, there's the bill that we anticipate everything, and then there's the actual student account, which is the actual sort of credits and debits of charges and credits and all that. But bottom line, keep in mind, in most cases, there's nothing you need to do. Now, I say most cases. When it comes to things like the FAFSA and things like that, sometimes students get selected for verification. We need to confirm different things. The Department of Ed tells us about different things. In those cases, we will be reaching out, if we haven't already, for some follow-up, either documentation or something that we need processed on the student's behalf. But we will be in touch if there is anything you need to do. If we are not reaching out to you for anything, then there's nothing you need to do with regards to your grants. You could just sort of presume everything will be on the bill and go from there. Okay, so next up, I want to talk about loans a little bit. So first off, our office does not use loans to meet financial need. And I think that was pretty clear from admissions earlier on. And we try to make this clear in our offer letters when they go out, that we're meeting your full demonstrated financial need with grants and a work expectation. We are not using loans to meet financial need. That being said, if you want to borrow a loan or you feel you need a loan to help meet the contributions that we determined, they are certainly available for students and families to take out there. So the first loan I'm going to mention here is the Federal Direct Student Loan. If you need a loan, this is the first place to start if you're eligible to fill out the FAFSA in the first place. So it's pretty much the best educational loan out there. It generally has the lowest interest rates for educational loans. So this coming year, it's going to be 6.53%. So that's been ticking up a little bit the past couple of years. But overall, it's still not a bad rate for a loan that is, where you don't have to put up any collateral for it. So the only drawback for this loan is that as a freshman, you can only borrow $5,500. So that's not a lot if you don't have as much in grants, or you really just need to be borrowing more than that amount. So there is that limit there. But there's some great things. The loan could be subsidized, which means that the federal government is actually paying the interest for you while you're in school. It doesn't go to repayment until you're actually no longer a student. So there are really some great terms about this loan that make it attractive if you need to borrow. So certainly would recommend that if you do need to borrow and you're eligible to fill out a FAFSA, that this is the first loan that you take a look at with regards to borrowing. Okay, now sometimes $5,500 is just not quite enough if you need to borrow more. Or let's say, the family's like, yeah, we want to get a loan in the parent's name as opposed to the student. We want to leave, student debt free, but we do still need as parents to, or family members to borrow some loans. So in that case, there is the Federal Parent Plus loan. So in the first loan, actually, I forgot to mention one of the things is like most students are just going to be automatically approved, regardless of credit history for that particular loan. The Plus loan, it does require credit check, but it's effectively just looking to make sure that you have no negative credit history. So as long as you don't have a bankruptcy or something really negative on your credit report, you're going to be approved for a Parent Plus loan. Another key difference with this one is that you can actually borrow up to the cost of attendance of a school like Columbia minus the other aid, right? So they're not going to let you borrow this loan to put an addition onto your home or go buy a car, something else. But it is allowed to, the cap is really what is the cost of attendance at the school minus any other aid you're getting. So you can borrow as much as you need at Columbia for this one. Now, the biggest downside, I think, with this loan is the interest rate does tend to be a little bit higher. So, it was like 6.5% on the Federal Direct loan. We're at 9.08% for the Plus loan this year. So that's getting up there, even for an unsecured loan where you're not putting any collateral up there. And repayment does begin when the loan is dispersed. Now, you can ask to have that deferred to later, but the default for it is for repayments to start right away. Okay. So how do you apply for these loans? And what if that still doesn't suit your interest there? So first off, we have our website here. I have our link to the loan section of our website at the top there. And there's lots of good information about all these loan programs there. Now, actually, let me say this. There's going to be a couple of different links throughout this presentation. And I actually really want everybody to focus on the presentation and not the links. So at the end of the session, at the end of the presentation, I'm actually going to give you a single link that has all of the links I've talked about in the presentation. So don't worry about copying anything down at this point. When we get to the end of the presentation, I'm going to give you a single link that literally has everything listed, and actually a couple extras in addition to the ones we listed in the presentation. So let me calm some nerves about how fast you could type stuff down or write stuff down there. All right, now when you're on our website here, there's going to be information both on how to apply for the federal direct loan and the PLUS loan, but then there's also information on private loans. So the federal loans are not the only game in town. There are private lenders out there. This may be a bank that you have your checking account with. This may be, specifically a lender who only does educational loans, but there are lots of educational loans out there. The trick with private loans is, one, they are all credit-based. And two, they do vary a lot more in terms of their interest rates, their terms, their conditions. So it's not something I can go into a whole lot of detail here because it is such a varied marketplace. But if that 9% on the PLUS loan looks a little high for you, this is certainly something you could look into, shop around for interest rates and see what's there. But we do have good information on our website about private loans in general, as well as a short suggested lender list of lenders who we've worked with in the past at Columbia, and know that they're solid companies and they're going to be reliable in terms of their customer service and things like that. All right, so enough about loans. Let's talk about work study and student employment. Okay, so most students receiving Columbia grants are expected to make some sort of work contribution towards their educational expenses, right? So that's, if you look at your financial aid offer letter, that's part of what we do is we say, okay, here's your cost of attendance. Here's how much we feel your parents are able to contribute. And then, by the way, as a student, we expect you to work over the summer and maybe work during the academic year and earn some money to help contribute towards your college costs. So how does that work here? Well, you're going to see one of two things on your financial aid offer letter. The first is federal work study, or the second is student employment. In some rare cases, you might actually see both listed, and the amount is split between the two there. So the key differences between these two things. First off, federal work study is actually subsidized by the Department of Education, right? So when you're getting your paycheck, you're getting like a single paycheck, but on the back end, part of that's being covered by the Department of Ed, and part of that's being covered by Columbia. If a student is doing student employment, or what we sometimes call casual employment at Columbia, then actually all the earnings are being fully paid by Columbia. Okay, so what does that really mean? From the student's sort of paycheck perspective, it actually doesn't mean anything, right? You're still getting the same exact pay, still coming in the same way. But it also means that certain jobs are limited in who can obtain them. So if a job is specifically labeled a federal work study job, then you actually have to have federal work study in your financial aid offer letter to apply for that job. However, any student, whether it's a student employment or a federal work study, any student on campus is able to apply for positions that are listed as casual. So those are some differences there between these two items as they're listed in your financial aid offer letter there. By extension, there's different sites to use to apply for the two different positions. So I've got those links there. Again, don't worry about copying those down because they can be a little long and you don't want to miss part of it. But they'll be on the sheet I share later. Okay, so let's stay on this topic, but not necessarily talk about the difference between those two programs. For any student, whether it's federal work study or a casual job, a couple of pointers and things to keep in mind. So first off, you definitely want to apply for jobs at the beginning of the semester or even a little bit earlier if you like. It's really entirely up to you when to start looking. I can tell you that employers will post jobs when they're ready. So some jobs may not get posted till later. Some may be posted right now. It's really up to employers to post throughout campus to post jobs whenever they want. And that also means that, like, let's say you decide to take a break your first semester, not work your first semester and work in the spring term, there will be jobs that get posted, throughout the year. You can apply for at a later time. But I think the most common approach that most students take is looking to apply for jobs, usually in probably like, mid to late August and early September is when most students are doing that. Okay. But I would also say that it's helpful to have your course schedule set before you really start applying for jobs in earnest. So that's something to keep in mind, is that employers are sometimes going to ask, well, when can you work? And you do need to have your schedule to be able to tell them what hours and which days you're able to work. So keep that in mind, but that's a little bit about the timelines there, and that you can do it all year round. One of the great things about Columbia, and this has been the case for a while, is we have a minimum wage on campus of $15 an hour. So every job, it doesn't matter if you're just sort of like sitting at a desk checking people into dorms, working, for an office on campus, whatever it is, the minimum wage is $15 an hour. For some of the more involved positions, the pay actually goes up to about $22, $23 an hour. So the pay for these jobs is actually pretty good there. And students are actually able to earn, quite a bit of money through their positions on campus. Actually, let me jump around with my bullets there. So for the $3,090 that most Columbia grant recipients are going to have in their financial aid awards, that works out to about like 7 or 8 hours per week, which is actually very easy for most of our students to do. So, all right. A common question we do get, though, is, well, what happens with those earnings? Like, does it get credited towards the bill? No, it actually doesn't. It does, any earnings from a work-study job on campus actually get paid to the student via direct deposit. So they are work-study positions, but it is sort of processed like any other job. You're going to fill out your W-4, and you're going to do some paperwork, and then you're going to set up direct deposit. And as you submit your timesheets, so for all the hours you work every other week, you'll get a biweekly paycheck that is paid to your direct deposit. So that's sort of how the mechanics work of work-study jobs on campus. Okay, so we talked about grants, loans, work-study. The next up on our topic here are outside scholarships. Okay, so these are scholarships that can actually be that students get from outside of Columbia. We've got some great students, some amazing students here, and when they apply for these scholarships, they tend to get them and get more than one at times. That's certainly not uncommon for us to see many students who get multiple outside scholarships. So first off, the policies around this are actually more detailed than I can get into in this presentation. So if you do have outside scholarships, I would highly encourage you to check out our website and read through all the different policies about it. But I will highlight the key policies here. Related to that, if you haven't already, please send us your outside scholarship form. So this is a form that we require in our office. It's something that we would have emailed about a couple of weeks, maybe a month or so ago. It's not something we require as part of your first year application up front, because, hey, we realize when you're applying in, say, November, December, or January of this past year, you may not have known about all your outside scholarships. So for first year students, we actually don't send you information about this form until later, but you should have received that email, and please do submit that to us. Even if you don't have any, it's good for us to know that you're not going to have any outside scholarships. Or if you have any updates, so let's say you maybe knew about one or two, you submitted the form, and now you got a third. By all means, please update us on that so we can make sure everything is accounted for when the funds arrive here at Columbia. Okay, now to the policy. Okay, so the key thing with outside scholarships are that they can definitely be used to cover the student contribution and the student employment expectation, but in excess of that, they do start to reduce Columbia grants. Okay, now, like I said, there's a couple other aspects to this policy, some fine details about it, but that's the general policy, and something to keep in mind is students can get around $5,500, $5,600 in outside scholarships in your first year before it really has an impact on your financial aid. Okay, now you might be wondering, like, what exactly that means. So I find it useful to pull up a couple of examples here. So, okay, so on the far left, we effectively just have, I just reprinted the base student contribution, the base student employment expectation there, which adds up when you add the two up to $5,490 there. Okay, so example one, let's say a student gets $3,500 in outside scholarships, and that's great. That's fantastic. What we look at when we see that is like, okay, well, we're going to reduce the student contribution entirely. We're just going to kind of wipe that portion out. And then we're going to reduce the student employment by $1,100. And, when you add those up, that's the $3,500. And great, there's still some student employment left over, and there's no need for us to adjust the Columbia grants. Okay, now, let's say a student was really out there. They got like maybe two $4,000 scholarships, or a big $8,000 scholarship, or whatever the case is. And that will fully wipe out both the student contribution and the student employment expectation. But then it does reduce the Columbia grant in this case by $2,510. So that's something to keep in mind. There's lots of rules about financial aid we need to follow. in our office. And this is one of the implications of getting too much in the terms of outside scholarships, is that it will impact the Columbia grant. Now, again, there's many nuanced policies around this. One I'm going to throw out there, you see it at the bottom of this slide here, is that if your scholarship isn't that realm where it's going to be reducing Columbia grant, one of the things you can do is go get a computer up to $1,500. And once you give us that receipt, we allow the outside scholarship to be used towards that particular expense. So let's say you actually spend exactly $1,500 on a new computer. In this example on the right, then your Columbia grant would only be reduced by $1,010, right? Because we're allowing the $1,500 to kind of be accounted for against the computer. So there's some examples. If you're concerned about this, you have questions about this, certainly you can reach out to our office about your particular situation, and we can help you understand the policy implications as well as your options. Because I think certainly our staff will do things like maybe work with the outside scholarship agency and see, can they send some of that money next year instead of this year, right? So let's kind of keep you under the caps now and save some of it for later. So we do work with families to try and maximize the impact of your outside scholarships within the policies that we work with. All right. So moving on to some good to know topics. So this is just sort of either some just-in-time information or some other things that we want you to know. So first off, tuition fees are now approved by the trustees. And maybe like, okay, Mike, what does that exactly mean? Well, whenever we sent out your initial financial aid offer letters, whether it was early decision, regular decision, transfer, or combined plan, the tuition numbers weren't set yet. So your letters had a little asterisk saying that, these are either your awards based off the 23-24 numbers, or this is pending approval by the trustees and things like that. So now we have trustee approval, so we can send everybody finalized financial aid letters, which is actually going to be happening this Friday, July 19th. Now, when I say, oh, you didn't have finalized before, and oh my goodness, Mike, what's that mean? Are you going to take away our aid? No. So first of all, I don't want anybody to worry, because your net cost will not change from your original letter. Okay, so let me make that blanket statement that your net cost won't change from your original letter. So what might change? Let's see. If you were a regular decision, transfer, combined plan, at that point, we kind of knew what the costs were. We just couldn't say they were officially approved yet. So in those cases, your letter, your grants really shouldn't change at all. It's now just going to say, well, the costs are finalized, so your aid is finalized. But your total grants in those cases will remain exactly the same, as will your net costs there. Because we did actually have the numbers, we just couldn't say we had the numbers at that point. Now, if you applied early decision, your letter said, well, this financial aid offer is based off our 23-24 costs. And well, the trustees did raise tuition a little bit in fees since last year. So what does that mean? Well, tuition fees went up, but because we meet full financial need, that means your grants are going to go up by the difference in tuition and fees that the trustees approve there. So again, and this is where that your net cost will not change. So for those who applied early decision, the cost of attendance is going to go up on this new letter, but your grants are going to go up by the exact same dollar amount as the cost of attendance went up. So your net cost, that number you saw at the bottom of your financial aid letter, will remain exactly the same there. So, oh, and the last point about this, while we're having to do this work, we will have to take down the financial aid information on the tracking website. That's going to happen later this afternoon, and but it'll come back up on Friday once we send all the aid letters there. So, okay, the next good to know, reapplication for 25-26. And I know we've been spending a lot of time focusing on 24-25, and that's definitely where we should be spending the time. But hey, while I've got your attention, I want to take advantage of it to remind everybody that you do have to reapply for financial aid every year. And here's sort of the key things. So first off, FAFSA and Profile are set to launch on October 1st this year. And the word from the Department of Education is that they are looking to actually get the FAFSA launched on October 1st. So last year, this time, they had actually given us some things saying, hey, it's going to be delayed, but they didn't give us details. At this point, they've noted they are looking for an October 1st launch, and that should be the case. For quick reference, I put down our school codes. Make sure you do use our school codes to get us that information so that we get it directly and not one of the graduate schools at Columbia or Columbia College in Chicago or some other place. Don't forget about the outside scholarship form. So that's something that sometimes returning in reapplications families forget about because it's not part of IDOC. So don't forget about that form. We'll let you know if it's missing, but don't forget about it. And the deadline for all this is May 5th of 2025. So it's a long ways away, but we do encourage families to submit their applications, as early as they can. So, you don't have to be like, oh, it's October 1st or 2nd, I've got to get this done. But certainly, I think by the winter break, when you get into December or maybe the Thanksgiving break, be a good time to get in and get that done and just have it done with. And that way we could also reach out earlier if we have any questions, or have anything to go over. One thing I will say about reapplications is while families do have to reapply for financial aid every year, generally your aid is going to be pretty consistent as long as your income, assets, and expenses are consistent. So, whenever we see big changes in financial aid awards, it's usually because there's a big change in either income and assets, or the other one is number in college, right? So there was a lot of hoopla this past year about the FAFSA not taking the number in college into account. We at Columbia still did, right, for our institutional awards. And so, but what that does mean is, let's say if your award is based off 2 or maybe even 3 students in college this year, and next year there's only 1 or 2, if that number drops, that might impact things. But any changes in financial aid awards are directly tied to and proportional to what's happening with your financial aid, your income and assets and expenses on your financial aid application. If everything is pretty stable and pretty well set from year to year, then your costs, your parental contribution and the net costs and things like that will be pretty stable over time there. Okay, so a couple of just random items here. Again, while I have your attention, I want to talk about the health insurance waiver. Now, this is something that Columbia Health will go over in their session later in the month. I think that's in another about 2 weeks or so. But one of the biggest things we see when we're counseling families is, wow, this is bigger, a larger bill than we were anticipating. What happened? And one of the things is that the financial aid award doesn't account for health insurance, but Columbia does require that everybody have health insurance. Now, the large majority of our students are able to be enrolled on their parents' employer-based plan or their Medicaid plan, especially if they're from New York State. But Columbia does require insurance, and effectively, if you don't go through the waiver process, they will automatically enroll you in the Columbia Health Plan at a cost of $5,000 per year, at least for this year anyway. And that is not something the financial aid in terms of grants always covers. In some situations for students with very, very high financial need, we can help out with that. But for a large number of our students, that is not something we can help with. So I want to highly encourage everybody that if if as a student you're able to stay on your parents' plan or in the New York State Medicaid plan in particular, that you go to this link I have there and fill out the waiver request. It just went live yesterday, so I wanted to put that out there and save everybody a lot of headache when the bills come out of having this extra cost on there. But again, Columbia Health will go over that in more detail later on. I also wanted to put a plug in for the Billing and Student Services webinar today at 11:30. So I'm talking a lot about finances and money and things like that, but I haven't been talking about the bill, how to pay it, how to become what's called an authorized payer, the Student Service Center. There's a lot of stuff I'm not talking about, and you're actually going to hear from Kia Woods, who's just amazing, and one of our colleagues over in the Student Service Center. She's coming up at 11:30 and will address a lot of topics and questions related to that. And then we also, this is a big day for webinars, have the Fly at Columbia webinar today at 1 p.m. So this is actually only for students, but it's for our first-gen and low-income students. So if that applies to you as a student and you're interested in learning more about that experience here at Columbia, I highly encourage you to attend that one. All right, now last, I mentioned there's going to be that single link here that has all the links I've been talking about and then some. On our website, right? So here is that link. So if there's one link you're going to copy down or go to, this is in bookmark, this is probably the one to do. Now let me simplify it. The whole first part of that link is just our office's website. So if you have our office handy, you could do that. And then /countdown-to-Columbia. So on that page, if you go to it, and I've got it here, let me pull it up. You're going to find this website with sort of a nice little welcome paragraph. And then all the links and then some regarding loans, work study, including things like Lion's Share and the Federal Work Study Office where you go to apply for these worksite positions, our outside scholarship policy. We include some of the billing information too. So that's relevant to the next session, but we put some of that there because we do find families have questions related to that. Reapplication for next year, where to go for all the different forms. that Columbia Health waiver, and then our contact office's contact information is on this page as well, just for easy reference. So we try to make it visible enough for everybody. And but yeah. Okay, well, speaking of our office's contact information, here it is as well. So if you're on campus, we are in 618 Lerner Hall, which is Lerner is the building with the bookstore right on Broadway. There's our office phone number, email, and a link for appointments. And appointments are great, especially if you know it's going to be a more involved conversation. It's not just a quick like, do you have this form, or how do we do this? If you want to have a more involved conversation, we highly recommend appointments. We do them both in person as well as virtually over Zoom. And actually, if the parent's first language is Spanish as opposed to English, we actually offer appointments with Spanish-speaking personnel as well. So, so those are some great ways to get in touch with us. I'd be remiss if I didn't give a big shout out to my staff there. As I mentioned, we've got Karel, Jesse, and Simran who are helping to answer questions right now. And there's a picture of all of our staff. Unfortunately, with the exception of Simran was not there. He was on vacation that particular week that we took this picture. But there's the team. They're great. They are certainly here to help you as either student, parent, whatever the case is. We are there to help. Okay. And with that, I'll take questions. And I thought I'd put that link back up just in case you didn't get a chance to copy it all down the first time. So there's the link, and I will take questions at this point. And I think Jesse is going to queue them up for me.
Hi, Mike. We've had some really good questions today. Starting with a question about FAFSA. Is all of the FAFSA information received at this point? If I don't see the Pell Grant on my financial aid letter, when will I see that?
Got it. Yes, good question. Okay, so FAFSA, I would say 99.9% of FAFSA data is received at this point. So first off, we're receiving anything that the FAFSA sends us. My understanding is there are still some students where the parents do not have SSNs, that some of that is still being hung up in different ways. But for the most part, we have FAFSAs. There's still some issues with us updating certain aspects of them where we need to actually do some processing, but we do have them. We are actively processing them. So still some things, but we'll certainly be reaching out to families if we need additional information related to the FAFSA. And I think that's where we're mostly reaching out about it. Now, okay, so the second part of that was Pell Grants. Okay, so if you had a Pell Grant on your initial letter, your offer letter, and you don't now, there's one or two things that could be happening with that. The first is that when we sent your initial letters and we didn't have FAFSAs yet, we were estimating based off the information on your profile whether or not we thought you'd get an actual Pell Grant. So the CSS profile asked a lot of the same questions. We were able to actually use the Department of Ed's formulas to estimate Pell Grants. In most cases, that ended up being accurate. But there were some times where that's not accurate. And well, we thought you got a Pell Grant, and it turns out you actually didn't qualify for some reason. In those cases, if we remove the Pell Grant, we were going to fill that. So let's say we said, oh, you're going to get a $7,000 Pell Grant. Oh, sorry, the FAFSA says you don't qualify. In those cases, we're filling in that gap with institutional grants from Columbia, right? So sometimes we'll say your total grants don't change. That's what we mean is that, if something happens with a federal Pell Grant that we were expecting, then we're going to make up that difference there with the awards. Okay, now the other thing that might be happening is, oh, it's just getting hung up. So there are some students where, say, the Social Security Administration didn't confirm that you were a U.S. citizen, and we actually need to do a process. I'm going to be emailing some of those students about. I think there's only like 5 new students who fall into that category. But there may be some issue or verification or something else where we're working through processing the items with the FAFSA, and once we finish that, the Pell Grant will come back. So regardless, I think that the key takeaway, if you saw a Pell Grant and you don't now, is we're either going to fill it in if the Pell Grant is no longer valid or really shouldn't have been estimated in the first place, or we're going to be in touch with you if we haven't already about what needs to happen to get that Pell Grant back. So.
Another question has to do with health insurance. So if the waiver is approved, will they see an adjustment to the bill?
Yeah, so that's okay. So that's a good question. If the waiver is approved, will you see an adjustment to the bill? I'm going to say that depends. It depends on the timing. So if you go and put your waiver in today or tomorrow or with it, like sometime this week, I'm going to say, You'll be kind of in the first batch that they're reviewing. And what'll probably happen is on that original bill, you just won't see the health insurance charge in the first place. It just won't be there if you get the waiver submitted earlier on. Now, let's say, and this is going to come out more in the billing session next, but like, let's say you submit the waiver like a couple days to a week before when the bill goes out, or maybe even 2 weeks just because of the processing time, they're probably not going to have that reviewed and updated by the time the bills go out. So your bill will come out noting that you're being charged the health insurance. And then once everything gets processed, it will come off. Now, they'll come off the next billing cycle, but you can know that you don't have to pay that. So in short, it's all going to depend on timing. And it's also why I wanted to put that plug in, because the earlier you get that waiver done, the more likely it is that the waiver would be processed by the time the bills come out.
Another question, Mike, had to do with external scholarships.
Mhm.
If a scholarship is made to a student's name, does the student have to report the scholarship to Columbia, and how do they go about getting that money processed?
Sure. So I'll say it's actually pretty odd that an outside scholarship would be made out directly to the student. It does happen, but that's typically not the most frequent thing. Officially, that should be reported to us. There's a lot of federal regulations regarding how all this aid works. And so that should be reported to us on the outside scholarship form. If it's made out to the student, I'm going to presume it's being sent to the student and not to us. But in that case, the student can cash the check themselves, but they should be reporting it to us on our outside scholarship form. But I could tell you that the large majority, over 99% of outside scholarships, the checks are made out to Columbia, the checks are sent to Columbia, and then we process them directly onto the student accounts in conjunction with Student Financial Services. So and that's why that outside scholarship form is actually kind of important, is it helps us to get ahead of things. It's not great for us to make adjustments to packages if we have to make them later on when the funds arrive. If we know if we know an outside scholarship is coming, we can actually make those adjustments ahead of time, and then that just sort of makes for fewer surprises later on. So,
with that in mind, staying with the outside scholarship questions, can you briefly review how scholarships are applied?
Sure. So I guess you're reading the question of Jesse said, and I want to make sure I get it. Are we talking about like how we would split it, or
Yes, how we would apply outside scholarships.
Got it. So outside scholarships, how we apply them, I think, so partially it depends on how the agency wants us to apply them. Sometimes they say, hey, here's the fall amount, and put it on they say, okay, if that's the fall amount, we put it on the fall. Other times, so like it's for the full year. So if they tell us it's for the full year, we'll generally split it 50-50 between the fall and the spring. Now, related to some of this is like you can quickly kind of determine that, like, well, maybe I'm getting a lot more scholarship in the fall than in the spring, or vice versa. And for students who are receiving Columbia grants, what we try to do is adjust our grants so that you have an even total grant between the fall and the spring semesters, right? So let's say, in the one example, or let's just say there's $6,000 of outside scholarships coming in, 2,000 in the fall and 4,000 in the spring, right? So more is coming in the spring. What we would typically do is adjust our Columbia grants to be a little bit heavier in the fall and a little bit less in the spring, so that the total between the Columbia grants and the outside scholarships is the same between the semesters. So we find the families, just that's a lot easier. Having that consistency between the bills is a lot easier for families to work with there. So that's generally how we approach it. But let's say a student is doing doing a computer purchase or something like that. We can certainly work with both the student and the scholarship provider on how things are allocated to make sure things make sense for the family. So again, that's where we're here to help you and figure things out and talk through what the options are and how to actually make that happen.
We also had a question, Mike, about the student contribution.
Mhm.
And is it always $2,400? Does it stay the same?
Good question. And unfortunately, it does not. So as do the work study amounts. Now, they're not going up by crazy amounts, but the idea with those, so the student contribution is students earning, working over the summer and being able to save up some money from a summer job. And then the work study is working during the academic year. And part of the financial aid policy here at Columbia does presume that as students get more experience through their 4 years at Columbia, they're able to make a incrementally more higher wage each year. So the amounts do go up a couple $100 each year to the highest numbers. I want to say it's 34 and change for the student contribution by the senior year. So it's up by about $1,000 that senior year, and then it goes up to, I think, 3,600. So it goes up by about $600 for the work study component by the senior year. So, but it is incremental each year as those amounts go up.
Another question, are meal plans and their costs included in the information already received?
Yes, they are, certainly. So as a first-year student, it actually is pretty easy in your first year. So that we already have accounted for the meal plans and the housing expenses in your financial aid offers. And also, it's actually nice in your first year, like that there's only one meal plan rate. All the meal plans cost the exact same thing. So no matter which meal plan you pick, the rate that you that is being factored in is exactly the same. And the same thing for housing, although that's also true for upperclassmen. So both are in there, both are the exact same rate. You can make your meal plan choice completely independent, like whichever meal plan works best for you there. Now, when you become an upperclassman, as you can tell from the dining website, there's a lot more variety, a lot more options, and things get a little bit more complicated there. Now, it's not complicated in your aid and the fact that we're going to aid to a very particular, I believe it's the Easy 19 meal plan is what we'll aid to for upperclassmen. And if you go on a different meal plan, you can either save money or get more expense depending on a different meal plan you go on. So if you go on like a meal plan D, one of the cheapest ones in upperclassmen, that costs a lot less than what we're budgeting for in our financial aid award. And that's one way to reduce meals. Now, you have to eat, so you need to make sure that you either have enough money for buying meals elsewhere, or that you're going to be making your own meals or something like that if you do something like going on meal plan D, but does give you, there are more options as an upperclassman. So.
We had a question about, do students have to sign up for a payment plan or have an registered authorized user? Is that mandatory?
Yeah, those are good questions. While I know the answers, I might defer to Kia and her team in the session because those are definitely more within the student financial services and student service center wheelhouse. So those are things in general we can help you with, but I'm going to punt that for Kia coming up because she's directly going to address that up next.
What should the money earned through student employment be used for?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and what I'll say is, it's not a dollar for dollar comparison here, but a lot of times the student expense, the student portions or the student expectations for both the student contribution and the work study generally line up with what we call the unbilled expenses on the financial aid offer letter. So if you're looking at the top of the financial aid offer letter, we list a couple of different expenses. We say, well, here's tuition and fees, here's housing and meals, here's books and personal, here's travel, or books and supplies and personal expenses and all those things. So the first two, tuition and fees, as well as housing and meals, those are what we call the billed expenses, right? So that's what Columbia is sending a bill for, and that's what we're applying the grants against on those particular items. And but there are those unbilled, right? So when it comes to travel to and from campus, right? So that's not something, we're not going to send you a bill and say, please send us $500 so you can come to New York City, right? The idea is, if you're not local, you arrange your own transportation. Same thing with books. Books are not directly included. Students can decide to buy new books, to use books, try and get a free PDF online. They can go to the library and check them out there. There's lots of different options. So we acknowledge that those are expenses, but they're not things that we send a bill for, right? So these unbilled expenses, personal expenses as well, right? Pizza money, go and see a movie on the weekend, cell phones. Those unbilled expenses are generally what I think a lot of families use the work study earnings for, right? They say, okay, great, we're going to cover the bill. Now you have to get a job on campus and you're going to pay your own cell phone bill. You're going to take care of your books. You're going to take care of all these unbilled expenses on your own. I think that's a general concept that a lot of families use. Every family is different. and everyone will do different things differently. You know, maybe the cell phone's on family plan, so that makes more sense. But generally, the idea is that students, you know, with their earnings, they will use those towards their unbilled expenses.
A question related to that, Mike, was does earning your student employment impact your financial aid?
Yeah, so I would say generally no. Now there's a couple of different exceptions and like sort of really nitty-gritty situations. Certainly if a student earns lots of money, and by that, this is actually, well, more about the student contribution. I think if a student, every year we get one or two students who made like, you know, like really high five figures in their summer internship, right? They got that internship at Google or Facebook and, you know, really made tons of money. So in some of those cases, sure, that potentially can impact some things, but generally what you earn through your position does not impact your financial aid in a general sense, right? So if you earn more than what we expected, that's great, fantastic. You earn that money, you keep it. We're not touching your financial aid. Similarly, if you earn less or you just decide not to work a job at all, that's fine too. But we're not going to adjust your aid for either of those situations. So.
Going back to FAFSA questions, if there is a family that still has not been able to get their FAFSA processed, how will we be communicating with them or helping them through the rest of that process?
Yeah, I think if a family has actually not been able to get their FAFSA processed entirely at this point, then, well, I think first off, what's probably happening is you're getting missing information letters from us. So confirm that's the case. Or you can log into our financial aid tracking system to see if FAFSA list is received or not, to confirm. So we are proactively reaching out to anybody where the FAFSA, among other documents, might be missing at this point. And I would say is if you're having trouble with the department, there's some issues that like a lot of times up till now, we've unfortunately not been able to help out. But I think if you're still having problems at this point, it might be worth reaching out, schedule an appointment with us so we could kind of take a look at things ahead of time. And then determine how best we might be able to help you. We still might have to direct you back to the Department of Ed, but at this point, most of the issues are ironed out, so we should be able to either help you directly or help guide you on who to talk to at the Department of Ed to get things resolved, or how you might be able to get things smoothed out with that. So if you're look for MILs, check the tracking site. You know, we might actually have it, like the Department of Ed might have worked things out. I know we've seen that as well, where there have been issues, but they caught up with stuff and or fixed something, and all of a sudden a FAFSA came through. But if you're still getting MILs from missing information letters from us, and the tracking is showing not received, then you can reach out to us and we can help you figure that out.
Very good. Another question was regarding are you required to earn the full $3,090 in federal work study?
Yep, you're not required to earn the full amount. I think the key thing is, though, if you don't either earn the full amount or earn any of it, you know, it doesn't impact your grants, right? So you're not going to get more grants by not working, right? So but in the same way, if you work more, you know, it's not going to adjust your grants either, right? So they're really, you know, in most cases, it's just not an impact to grants, regardless of how little or much you work.
We have a question from a student who wants to know, how do you get your health insurance covered with Columbia grant?
Sure. Okay. So first off, not everybody gets that, right? So it's really going to be students who the parental contribution is, say, maybe $5,000 or less are the only ones that we would even, you know, be able to help out with on that. So if that's the case, reach out to us. But we do hope that students go through the waiver process first, right? Because certainly, you know, the most employer plans can get your insurance waived. New York State Medicaid, the plans can, the health insurance can be waived for that. It's really if you're from an out-of-state area and on Medicaid in those out-of-state areas where the insurance cannot be waived. So try to get it waived first. If you're on Medicaid from a non-New York state, I mean, I think that's one where you can just reach out to us. You know, but if you're if your parent's employer plan right now, try the waiver process first. If you're on New York State Medicaid, by all means, do the waiver process. If those don't work and your parental contribution is under 5,000 or so, by all means, reach out to us and we'll talk through that process. We'll talk through how to do that with having financial aid cover that.
Mike, there are several questions that have to do with payment plans, 529 plans. Can we just again reiterate where they can get this information?
Sure, yeah. The payment plan is managed by Student Financial Services, and the SSC helps out with that. So that's actually going to be talked about in the next session at 11:30 with Kia. 529s, I don't know that she's directly going to talk a lot about that, but so that's maybe worth me addressing here. So 529s or college savings plans are great plans. Hopefully a number of you have them. Don't worry if you don't, most families don't. But that is one mechanism for saving for college and helping to pay for college. So for those, there are some limits with 529s. It gets to this limit, this idea that you can't use more than it costs to attend Columbia. So if your, say, net cost to attend Columbia is $20,000, you can't ask for a $30,000 disbursement from your 529, but you can ask for up to the 20. That is something that on the Student Financial Services website, they can actually generate an invoice for you. Although I think for most 529 plans, they're just going to take the bill that comes out next month. You send the 529 plan that bill. They will then send the funds to Columbia and apply it to the student's account. So it's pretty easy and transactional. Like I said, most times the regular fall bill will be sufficient for the 529 plan to issue the payment. But if they need a separate letter, there's an office in Student Financial Services called third-party billing that can help with issuing invoices that need to be made. But a lot of times the regular invoice is fine. So Jesse, does that sort of answer a little bit about what?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
And there are some questions about the loan application process, the timing of that, and how to initiate that and what is needed.
Yeah, so for the loan application process, our website is actually updated with the appropriate information for next year's loans right now. So you could go to the links on the loan information on our website and start applying for loans right now if you want to. In terms of the timeline, I think there's two aspects of this. First off, I'll say is to actually get a loan, right? And for that, it's pretty flexible. We can actually process a loan up through the end of what's called the period of enrollment, or when the student's enrolled for the 24-25 academic year. That being said, there's when the bills due. So, you definitely, so even though we could process a loan, say in October, you definitely want to have things taken care of before the bill is due to avoid late fees and things like that. So in short, you can explore options right now. You can actually apply for loans right now. We certainly see students applying for them at this point. Go to our website to find information on links for where to go to apply for them. Effectively, the federal direct loan is going to be on our website. The Parent Plus loan is going to be on the Department of Ed's website, but we have the link there. And then for all the private loans, it's just going to depend on the lender, and those are varied. But you can certainly apply for those now. You can apply for them anytime throughout the year. But again, keep in mind that the loan needs to be processed, needs to be approved and sort of on the student account before the bills are due, to avoid late fees on the student account.
And going back to questions regarding outside scholarships, how can I verify that my outside scholarship was received?
Yeah, so that's a good question. What I'll say is they do take some time to process, and they generally come in bulk in August and September, and then trickling in October, depending on the organization. So the first thing I would say is check in with the organization to make sure they've sent it, because like I said, different organizations send them on different schedules. Once they've noted that they sent it, it does take a couple of weeks for that to process. Once it is fully processed, you will see it on your student account. So I think that's generally the best thing to do. But if you're not seeing it and it's been maybe 3 weeks since they sent it or something like that, in those cases, I would say you can certainly reach out to us and we can say, oh yeah, we have it here. It just hasn't hit your student account yet, or things like that. Or, because we do track it from the moment it hits our office. So we know it's there, even if it's on the student account once we have it. But there's lots of different chains along the process. But the final one is it will certainly show up on your student account when it's been cashed and applied to the account.
I think we've pretty much covered all the questions that were asked at this point. Let me just check for a few more. Okay, so with a Parent Plus loan, do you start paying interest only or principal and interest?
You actually have the option. So with the plus loans, there's more repayment options than with the federal direct loan, because the federal direct loan is just sort of postponed till while the student's enrolled in school. But with a plus loan, you can have the payment start immediately. You can do interest only. You can do interest in principal. Those are all different options and choices. Obviously, I think we would recommend that you start repayment immediately and doing interest and principal if you can, because that will just limit your overall interest on the loan over time. But if that is not just sort of feasible for you, you do have these other options to say only make interest payments, so you're at least not building up and accruing interest, or deferring the payments altogether till later. But again, interest will still build up even if you defer those plus loan payments there. So we do recommend you avoid that, because 4 years worth of interest is definitely going to compound over time and build itself up. But those are technical options if you need to use them.
We also have a question about the reapplication process.
Mhm.
Does both the FAFSA and the CSS profile need to be done annually?
Yeah, for most families, that definitely is going to be the case, is that we will need both the FAFSA and the profile in all 4 years. There are some students where we will waive the profile if your parental contribution was actually set at 0, and we really don't anticipate that changing. So for some of those students, we'll actually waive the profile and only require the FAFSA and the outside scholarship form. But as a general statement, I'm going to say both the FAFSA and the profile, as well as the outside scholarship form and copies of taxes, are going to be required each year. But once we're ready to kind of start the year, this won't necessarily be October 1st, but it'll hopefully be sometime in late fall. We will reach out to families, and at that point you'll see on the document tracking what all you need to do. So you can certainly wait for us to send that email out. But if you're getting a jump start and you just want to be done with it, I would say FAFSA and profile are generally required for all reapplicants. So I think one last one, and then we've probably got to wrap things up.
Yeah, I think there's just a general question about how can they ask more questions if
sure.
they come up later on.
Yes. So there was the slide. And what I'll also say is when you're on our website, so 2 things. I put contact information down here. But on our website, come up to contact us, office hours and appointments. And from here, when you can find us in the office, our email, our phone number, and the form to fill out to request an appointment, right? So whatever is most convenient for you. If it's midnight, you know what? Email may be best. If it's middle of the day and you've got a burning question, you just want to talk to someone, feel free to call us. If it's a more involved situation, or you just want to just not be, feel like you're having to get through it, you want, certainly by all means, make an appointment with us, and we can take our time and go through things there. But and if you're on campus, unfortunately, we're not open on move-in weekend, but if you're on campus other times, whether it's for a family weekend or just on campus, or you live in the New York City area, we can see you in the office as well. We do recommend appointments. Other students can obviously just sort of drop by for most things, but with parents, we would recommend making an appointment even for an in-person visit to our office. So, but we're happy to respond to questions through all these different channels here. All right, and well, with that, we are at time, and I definitely want to thank both Jesse, Karel, and Simran for helping out with questions today. Hopefully, we answered everything for you. And but if not, just reach out. We are here all summer long, so and we're going to be here. We're here all year round, actually. So feel free to reach out with what questions you have, and we'll be more than happy to answer them. Otherwise, have a great day. Enjoy the session at 11:30 on billing in the Student Service Center, as well as the rest of the summer webinar series. Take care, everyone.